Here we go again, Simon Chartier's New York Stories. And a few other little touches, as we start getting into the 80s. But one thing is, when I was going to Juilliard, I was also going to Hunter College at the same time. That is one cool thing about my parents. They set me. I really never paid any mind at school except for the music classes. That's the only attention I ever paid to anything about school. But I did like my music classes. And I went to Hunter. I studied classical music composition. And then I studied modern electronic classical music. Like, it's kind of like noise music. Kind of like my daughters play noise, but this was like musique concrète or something like that. It's like we used to just use all these machines and stuff and make all this crazy electronic classical music. And then I studied. They used to give us like 8 bars of a Beethoven symphony, and we'd have to analyze the harmony. But then I sat in on these other courses, jazz workshop with Milt Hinton, and Milt Hinton was the bass player for. He played for Chick Webb. He played for Charlie Parker. He played with Dizzy Gillespie, Louis Armstrong, Cab Calloway, and he also played on a ton of early rock and roll records. If they were cut in New York, he was on the upright bass on a lot of early rock and roll and doo-wop records, even rockabilly and blues records. So he was also an avid photographer, and I would go sit in on these jazz workshop classes, and there would be like 80 or 90 people in the class, and when he walked in, everybody felt silent. It was like a king walking into the room. He just had that presence. He walked in, and everybody, it was like a king, and he would show you various things, like I love jazz, and I've never been the most hotshot jazz player. What I have learned about it really did help me. I practice it all the time. But he had like the first tier of the guys that were really good at it already, and then I'd be sitting in the back, and I would just watch him teach. And he would show you various things like how to slap the bass, like rockabilly style. And he did it way before the rockabilly guys did it. So he would show the slapping techniques, and he would show various things, and it was just so great to be in his presence. I also saw him play at Carnegie Hall, so that's another thing besides Chuck Wayne was a huge influence on me was Milt Hinton, and so I had to put that in besides Chuck Wayne, and then. So now we're heading over to Studio 10. So I'm playing with Ivan, and that was a real wild ride. It's like, I went from playing Volare and New York, New York, and You Light Up My Life, and Night Fever, and just all this really sappy stuff. Some of it I don't remember, but Barry Manilow, whatever was a hit, we had to play. I went from that to playing like this real crazy, kind of dissonant, spiky, kind of Barbie meaning like barbed wire, not like Barbie the doll, but this very dissonant and angular form of punk rock based in like Television and Richard Hell, and with Ivan Julian. And Vinny was a really sharp drummer, always right on top of it, really played for the song, never overplayed. Great time. Bobby Albertson, he played with Iggy Pop even, and he was just great. Ivan was he was really sharp guy, really smart. And really, all these guys, they understood punk rock, and they understood the scene, and they understood what you had to do to be in the scene. So I joined their band, and it's like our first gig was like Max's. I was like, holy shit. I said gig of CBGBs. I was just, yay, I'm in it now. And I had my father was still alive. My dad's best drinking buddy had passed away and left me $1,000. And I knew that I was going to fritter the money away on drugs, like pot and pizza and records and so I said, I'm not, before I frittered this money away, I got on a bus and I went to this guitar store in New Jersey and bought a 1957 Les Paul Special. And I still have it. It's not this one. This one I got later, but I got it, and that's the guitar I was playing with Ivan. And at about the same time also, I knew this kid from hanging out in Central Park, and this kid was like 13 years old, 14 years old. I was like 20, but they knew where they were in the Heron, and they knew where to get the good shit on the Lower East Side. So I started going down a cop on the Lower East Side with this like 13, 14-year-old kid. But they were rich kid. They came from money, but they were swift about like knowing where to get the good manteca. So we go down there, and there was this guy Pork Chop he was on Stanton Street. Yes, Stanton Street, and that other one there that goes not Suffolk Street, the next one down. But anyway, yes. So we would go down there and we cop dope from this guy Pork Chop. He was a nice guy. He always had good dope too. So we go down there, get high, take the train back uptown. It was like I was starting to kind of drift into heroin, and I figured I could just do it once in a while. As long as I didn't do it every day, I'd be all right. But we started. So then Ivan, we played like, oh man, we played the Mud Club. I always dreamed about playing the Mud Club. And it's funny, back then, if you were in a band, if you're a musician, you didn't have to pay to get into anywhere. And the bouncers just knew who you were. So I would go to these clubs. Now I'm in the outsets with Ivan. I would go to the Mud Club. They would just wave me right in. Or any club. They would just wave me right in. Back then, if you were in a name band, they just knew who you were. It was fantastic. And so we were working on all our songs, and I really liked it because it was punk rock. It wasn't hardcore, which was starting to come out around then. It was like maybe the very, very beginning of hardcore, 1980, but it was still punk rock. And the difference between punk rock and hardcore is that punk rock comes out of rock and roll. It comes out of a lot of different strains of rock and roll, but it's still based in rock and roll, but it also has a melody. And whereas hardcore is more, I love hardcore, but hardcore is hardcore. It's very brutal music. A lot of it is based in metal. A lot of the early hardcore bands, they were really into Kiss first. Like before there was punk rock, they were like those Kiss kids. So they were kind of more into that kind of stuff. There's more heavy metal in hardcore, whereas punk is more coming out, like I said, rock and roll, or even like the Bobby Fuller Four or Link Ray, or even like the Kinks or the Faces, Steve Jones is a big Faces fan, and Glenn Matlock. So this was punk rock, the Outsets. They recorded a single. I recorded a single when we were on tour. So we were playing. Oh man, I was like, holy shit, here I am. I played Max's Mud Club, CBGB's, and we played Maxwell's out of Hoboken, and we played like Howard Stein's Rock Lounge. And I mean, we were playing all over the place, man. Danceteria, it was just a fucking gas. It was like, I was like 20, maybe 21, and it's like, okay, now I'm a fucking rock star, you know? I'm playing punk rock, you know, and uh, I got to take people come down and jam with us. So we would jam like Wayne Kramer from MC5. He came down and sat in with us. We played Ramblin' Rose. Robert Quine, the great guitar player from Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and then later on he was at Matthew Sweet, I think, or he played with Robert Quine. Is just like, you know, he's a New York legend. He sat in with us too. So I got to jam with these guys, you know. And meanwhile, I was going to go see these shows. I went to see Gang War with Johnny Thunders and Wayne Kramer. And then Iggy Pop comes out on stage. And they played Round and Round by Chuck Berry. It's like we're just playing all of a sudden it's like Iggy Pop and Thunders and Wayne Kramer on the same stage, you know. That's just the way things went back then. I went to the Mud Club and I saw the Blasters with fucking Lee Allen. I saw Sleepy LaBeef. He just blew my fucking mind, man. He came out, big giant guy in a cowboy hat. His whole band was right out of the van from Smackover, Arkansas. They fucking rocked the fucking roof off the fucking Mud Club. Like, holy shit. So, and I'm trying to learn these things on my guitar and everything. So then I'm hanging around Studio 10 at the same time a lot. And I'm hanging out there because they would let me crash there sometimes, or I would just go there, you know. I would wind up down there. I wasn't really playing with the country rock hippie band anymore. I was hanging out at Studio 10, and a couple of these guys that hung out there said, hey, we got this, there's this building and it had a fire, and a couple of the apartments are all burned out. They're all destroyed by fire and burned out and decrepit, but we can crash there. We can live there. So I moved down there. This guy Cisco from the Yippies moved me in his old telephone company van, right? So now I'm living on 5th Street between A and B. I mean, now it's all hipster, yuppie central. But back then, that place was fucking nuts, okay? I moved down there. I was like, holy shit. You know, it's weird because I had such a violent childhood. I got beaten so much. I saw so much bad shit when I was growing up that there's this part of me that just goes cold, that just goes numb when I'm in the shit. And I'm just like, I'm never more. So I just figured I could just fucking deal with it, you know? And there was like, the only way I could describe it is like I'd seen the South Bronx a lot because my father worked up there. And I'd seen like Williamsburg, Brooklyn too, where, okay, all the buildings are burned out. There was buildings that had collapsed partially. So there'd be this collapsed, burned out building and the bricks would fall into the street. So there'd be this pile of bricks like 6 feet high in the street and nobody would do nothing about it. Like the city wouldn't clean it up. So you just have to go around it. And there was water in the street. And then there was burned out cars sitting on cinder blocks, right? And a lot of and there was also just regular families. Like there was like, you know, working class Catholic, Puerto Rican, and Italian families living in these little tenement buildings, you know, with like statues of Jesus in the window and everything. And then there was like burnout buildings with junkies. There was a big heron cop spot called Black Tape, 2 doors down from my house. And and in the morning there would be a line, the cop line. Everybody would try to get straight before going to work, you know, because the whole thing about heroin is after a while you get really sick if you don't do it, and you got to do it just to get straight. It might not even get you high anymore, but now you got to do it just to not be sick, you know. And so I seen priests on the line, grandmas, everybody, you know, like from every walk of life, you know, and they go in the line. And then there'd be these 12, 13-year-old kids with golf clubs and bats, and they would steerers, and they would keep everybody straight. They'd stay in the fucking line, motherfucker, don't move. Cop or get off the block. Cop or don't cop. At the end of the block was a little bar that's now, it was, then later on, this is the sarcastic thing later on, it was Sophie's, the punk rock bar, where all the punk rockers in later years, like in the 1990s. It's where all the like squatter punk and drunk punk bands hung out, like Public Nuisance and Maggot, and and they would all hang out there, and it was the Bike Messenger hangout. But back then, it was like this weird little social club bar. Now, all the cars on the block were burned out cars on concrete blocks or just like abandoned cars. In front of this bar was this brand new blue and white Lincoln like town car with a Continental kit, like the fake spare tire in the back, fender skirts, blue and white, blacked out windows, immaculate car, shiny, fresh, waxed, right out of the, sat there every day, all the live long day. Nobody touched that fucking car. The car was connected somehow to this little bar that I never seen anybody going in or out of. Nobody touched the bar. It was immaculate. Nobody touched the car. I talked to Ray at Ray's Candy Store about this. You got to figure out, whose bar was that? Whose car was that? Like, even the fucking skeeviest dope fiend on the block knew not to touch that shit, right? So, the first day I moved in this place, okay, it was a burned out building. We opened up the refrigerator and it was full of millions of dead cockroaches and all their eggs. You know, cockroach eggs, they kind of look like a cockroach. They got the ridges on, but they don't have antennas and feet and everything. And that smell, like cockroaches have this kind of musky smell. It was full of millions of dead cockroaches. Just shut the refrigerator door. All right, we seen that. And there was, my room didn't have windows. It had just like boards, like wooden boards nailed over the windows. It wasn't a full-on abandoned building. Half of it was burned out. The other half still had electricity and hot water and lights, and like people were living in it and paying rent. But these guys somehow they bribed the superintendent of the building like $50 or something to let us squat there. So we come in there, and there had been a bank. Like right there was this giant empty lot just full of rubble and brick and like debris from. It had been a bank. It had been a bank, and they'd torn down the bank, but they tore that down in 1978 or 79, like right before I moved down there. So it was an empty lot just full of bricks and busted up rocks and everything. And the first day we moved there, my roommates were hippies, and they had the long hair. They were like, Studio 10, like hippie guys. And the guy had a peace symbol and a marijuana leaf, like embroidered on the back of his denim jacket. And the first day, these guys hanging out for a black tape, and they go, hey, you a flower child, you like marijuana? And the guy's like, yeah, brother, I smoke pot. And the guy just pulls out this big knife, like, and starts chasing my roommate down the block. He runs down the fucking block. They didn't bother me for some reason. It's so funny because it's funny. The block was then another guy got stabbed to death in the middle of the night while I was asleep right outside. It wasn't the window. It was a piece of wood, right? The air used to come in, like the drafts. There was some kind of fight outside. I woke up and the guy got stabbed to death in the street right outside the fucking window. I was trying to sleep, and I didn't have a phone. I was playing with Ivan, but I couldn't keep my guitar there, obviously, in my amp. It was enough I should just go in and out and, like, kind of try to exist in that place. I wasn't going to, like, get jumped on Avenue B for my guitar. No fucking way. So I had my guitar and my amp were over at Studio 10. So basically, I was trying to live off the money I made playing with the outsets, and I would go get up in the morning. You couldn't cook or nothing in that place, so I would go. Back then you could get like a breakfast special for $1.25, like eggs, potatoes, toast, and a coffee. Or I would get a coffee, and I would go over to Studio 10, and I'd practice guitar there all day. I would just sit there and practice, go over my songs for Ivan. I had my record player over there and all my rockabilly records, so I'd sit there trying to learn rockabilly guitar licks like off of Gene Vincent records, and Chuck Berry licks off of Chuck Berry records and shit like that, you know. I would hang out there, and then I would kind of just go back to Avenue B to sleep or hang out or something. My roommates are really into dust, but they called it DPT, but it was just some kind of weird fucking dust. They used to get it for free from this church. There was this church on 9th Street between 1st and A, and for some reason there was some kind of religion where they were allowed to give you psychedelics legally or whatever, so it was this kind of dust shit. And I used to smoke it with them, but they were really into the dust, you know. I would smoke it once in a while, but I kind of didn't like it. It tasted like burning plastic and made you feel like you were going to die, right? And of course I had like all that, you know, hair on right next door to me, so I would fuck around with that, you know. But I didn't want to fuck around with it too much because I knew what would happen. And I saw it every day, like the junkies and, like, I was trying to stay out of trouble, but you know me. So but my drug and alcohol and me never mixed. I can't really fucking drink, you know. I never had a good experience with alcohol. Like I could never just have like one drink or something. It was the worst drugs I ever did, and I done every drug that you can ever fucking imagine that was around back then I had done, but the worst one was alcohol. So they used to give us plenty of booze when I was playing with the Outsets, and sometimes I'd get really drunk, you know. It wasn't a good thing because I'm not a good drunk. I'm a fucking asshole when I'm drunk. So that wasn't good. And the way I was living, I didn't really write anything down. I just kept everything up here. And so I had a band in the meantime with my high school buddies, Willie Henry and Johnny Sender. And we were playing, it was like kind of my own band. I was doing my own thing besides playing with Ivan, and Willie Henry was the singer, and Johnny Sender was the bass player. And Willie was, he was a theater major, and he was a very theatrical, stagey, campy kind of guy, and he was a great entertainer. We had a gig at the Lone Star Cafe, which is a super prestigious place, you know, like if I tell you the people that used to play there like all the time, you know, blow your mind. We got a gig there, but I double booked myself. I took the gig. Remember, I didn't have a phone. I didn't write anything down. I didn't have a phone. If I wanted to find out what was happening, I'd go to Tompkins Square Park and hang out in the corner where all the hardcore kids hung out. Like Vinny Stigma would hang out there, and Johnny Bloodclot, and Lee Marie, and Zahn, right? And Zahn got back in touch with me. He called my mother, actually, and my mother loved Zahn, so we got back in touch, and he was talking about the Pop Tones and how the Pop Tones were going to take over the whole scene, and, you know, that he was, you know, and then he would come down to Studio 10 sometimes. So I was back in touch with Zahn, the guy that got me into punk in the first place. And I would just go over there and find out what was happening, or I'd go over to Ivan's house and knock on the door, ring the doorbell, or I'd go to Vinny D'Annunzio's house. Vinny D'Annunzio lived in the same building as Richard Hell, Allen Ginsberg, and Harley Flanagan, and Vinny D'Annunzio. It was on 12th Street between A and B. And so I used to run into all those guys going up and down the stairs. I think that's the first time that I met Harley. I think he was 11 or 12 years old. He was playing drums in the Stimulators. And he had moved, he was living in Europe, and he moved to Lower East Side in April 1980. So he preceded me by about 6 months to the East Side. So we was both living on the East Side, but I was on 5th and B, and he was on 12th. And I used to just go, that's how I found out what was happening. Or I'd go, so I double booked myself. I took the gig at the Lone Star the same night that the Outsets had a gig at Howard Stern's Rock Lounge. I didn't know what to do about it, so I froze. I should have been like, look, I can't do this gig, Willie. Can we this is now the way I would handle it. I would have been, look, I fucked up. I double booked. I'm going to have to reschedule with the Lone Star. I didn't know what to do. Remember I was kind of I was a 20-year-old drug addict that didn't have a lot of skills at not being an asshole. So I didn't do nothing about it. I just figured somehow I could do the gig and make it over to the other place, which didn't happen. And I wound up fucking up both gigs. And then I wound up fucking up both gigs, and they threw us out of the Lone Star, and I was so angry at myself, I took a beer bottle and busted it on the sidewalk, and then I slashed my whole face wide open on this side with the bottle. And so I'm bleeding all over the place. I got this big cut on my face, and I go and I get there 2 minutes before Ivan's supposed to go on. I'm covered in blood. And I just play the gig, and I'm bleeding all over the place and all over my guitar and everything. And then I was just in complete shame and disgrace and self-hatred, and I go back to the Avenue B Death House and fucking collapse over there. I think you can see a lot of my stories end with me collapsing in a pool of blood. So I cut myself, and another time, we were going to go play in Philadelphia and then Washington, D.C., so we were going on a tour. And this is my first real rock and roll tour. I mean, I toured with the Classics. Plenty of shit went on the Classics tour, in terms of extracurricular rock and roll bullshit. It just wasn't very rock and roll when we was up there playing, But going on tour with, the Outsets, I was so stoked, but the Outsets had a manager, this guy Jake Riviera, who also owned like F-Beat Records, and he had managed Elvis Costello and and he also, I think, Nick Lowe. So Jake he said, this is for the whole tour. Here's some speed for the band for the whole tour. And he gave me this bag full of these black beauties. They're amphetamines. So what I did is, I beat the whole band out of their fucking speed. I kept it for myself, but we're playing a gig, and I took a couple of these speeds, and I felt pretty good, So I drank a couple of beers, and I felt great, and then it's like, oh, I'll do some more speeds. So I felt fucking great. I did the whole band's speed for the whole tour, it was like a 4 or 5 day tour, but, so I guess it was about, I don't know how many Black Beauties it was. I think it was about 10 or 14 of them, right? And I drank about a case of beer. So after the gig, I get a speed OD. And it's like all of a sudden, this whole side of my body, right? This is my right side, your left side, right? It fucking catches fire. It's like fucking burning. And I can't see out of this side of my face. And I got this huge ringing noise in my ear. And it's like it was burning. And all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. I stopped breathing, and I'm in the back of the van, and I kind of felt like I'm lying in the back of the van, and I can't move one whole side of my body, and I can't breathe, and I'm like, holy shit, you're gonna die, you're gonna fucking die in the back of this. It wasn't a van; it was like a 1969 Chevy half-ton panel truck with no windows on it. Cool truck. I loved that truck. Wish I had it now. But somehow I came out of it. I don't know how the fuck I came out of it. I came out of it, and I got up, and I asked him to stop the van, and I just like threw up. I OD'd. And I told the guys what I did. We made it to Philly. We slept on some guy's floor. So I woke up in the middle of the afternoon, and the first thing I started doing is getting high again. So, as you could see, I kind of, like, vexed Ivan much, but I sure had a great time playing in that band. All right, we played Irving Plaza, the Ritz, all those other places I made. We played fucking Irving Plaza. We played the fucking Ritz. You know, I mean, shit. I had my day. You know, I'm 62 now. I'm just kind of doing my thing, but like, hey, I played them fucking places, man. You know, in my time, and so you know, I love Ivan. I've spoken to him. He had cancer and he beat it. He's a great guy, but damn, man, I made really great music with him. We were a good band. But Oi Gewalt, the fucking sourest that I gave this poor guy, he didn't deserve it, you know? Uh, but he went on to be very successful, and he is very successful. And Ivan, I owe you a lot of debts, man. I owe you that you got me into the downtown punk rock scene of the early 1980, and I owe you that you fucking tolerated my fucking shit for a whole fucking year. Uh, the other thing I'm going to say is, yeah, I was late to everything. I missed the Summer of Love, and I missed the whole rebellion, like, of the 60s, like the whole revolution, you know. By the time I got old enough to be a revolutionary, there was no revolution left, you know. Then I missed the real early days of punk rock. I missed the Dolls. I missed like the early Heartbreakers, you know, 75, 76 with Richard Hell, you know. By the time I started jumping on the punk bandwagon, it was like 78, you know. Uh, so I have invented nothing new. I didn't ever invent no new style of music or nothing. I just played what I loved. So that's Simon Chartier's New York Stories for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to try to remember to turn the fucking comments on in YouTube. If you want to send any money to PayPal, here's my PayPal address. Any money, it's right here. Any money that you chip in is going to go to my recording fund so I can record. I just put out another record. It's on Bandcamp. And you know, then I'm just going to keep making records as long as I can. That's my thing now. So please do leave a comment. I hope you enjoy these stories. And, you know, as I think of them as they come back to me, I'll tell them more and more. I'm going to keep on this whole... I got so many stories about Avenue B Death House in Alphabet City back then, and then the RAR and the Yippies thing. It's going to take up a bunch of episodes, and the people that I met that I'm still friends with for my whole life. And I'll just keep them coming. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.